Book 20. Odysseus prepares for his revenge. When dawn arrived inside Odysseus' lovely home, women slaves were up and making tireless fire. Then the men whose Syracuse lords arrived. Behind them came the swineherd, leading in 3 hogs, the best of all he had. He turned them loose to feed inside the splendid yard while he talked to Odysseus with words of reassurance. Strangers, these Achaeans, do they have any more regard for you? Or in these halls are they dishonoring you the way they did before? Shrewd Odysseus then answered him and said, Well, Eumaeus, I hope the gods pay back the injuries arrogant men so recklessly have planned in someone else's home with no sense of shame. As these two were saying these words to one another, Melanthius, the goatherd, came up close to them, leading the very finest she-goats in his flocks, part of the suitors' feast. The 2 herdsmen came with him. He tied the goats up by the echoing portico and started hurling his insults at Odysseus. Stranger, are you still bothering us here inside the house, begging from the people? Why don't you get out? I think it's clear the 2 of us won't say goodbye until we've had a taste of one another's fists. The way you beg is not appropriate. Achaeans do not have feasts in other places. Melanthius spoke, but shrewd Odysseus said nothing. He shook his head in silence. Deep in his heart he was planning trouble. Then a 3rd one joined them, Melanthius, an outstanding man, bringing in a sterile heifer and plump she-goats for the suitors. He tied these animals with care, approached Odysseus, and spoke to him. His words had wings. Greetings, honored stranger. Though you're facing many troubles now, may you find happiness in future days. When I recall Odysseus and think of him, I start to sweat. My eyes fill up with tears, for he too, I think, is dressed in rags like these, wandering among men somewhere, if indeed he's still alive, looking at the sunlight. The resourceful Odysseus then answered him and said, Herdsman, you don't appear to be a man who's bad or one who lacks intelligence. I see for myself your understanding heart, and so I'll swear a powerful oath to you. Odysseus will come home. With your own eyes you'll see the suitors killed, if that's your wish, these men who act as if they own the place. The cattle herder answered him, Ah, stranger, how I wish Cronus' son might bring about what you just said. Then you find out how strong I am and what my hands can do. Eumaeus also prayed like that to all the gods, for wise Odysseus returned to his own home. Summary: the suitors continued to feast and to abuse Odysseus in disguise. End summary. Book 21. The Contest with Odysseus' Bow. Bright-eyed Athena then placed inside the heart of wise Penelope, Icarius' daughter, the thought that she should set up Odysseus' halls, the bow and the gray iron axes for the suitors, as a competition and the prelude to their deaths. Summary: Penelope goes to the storage chamber and collects Odysseus' bow and his axes. End summary. Once the lovely lady reached the suitors, she stood there by the doorpost of the well-constructed hall with a bright veil on her face. On either side stood loyal attendant women. Then Penelope addressed the suitors with these words. Listen to me, bold suitors who've been ravaging this home with your incessant need for food and drink since my husband's now been so long absent. The only story you could offer up as an excuse is that you all desire to marry me and take me as your wife. So come now, suitors, since I seem to be the prize you seek, I'll place this great bow here belonging to godlike Odysseus. And then, whichever one of you can grip this bow and string it with the greatest ease, then shoot an arrow through 12 axes, all of them. I'll go with him, leaving my married home, this truly lovely house and all these goods one needs to live, things I'll remember, even in my dreams. When she said this, she then told Eumaeus, the loyal swineherd, to set the bow and gray iron axe for the suitors. Then among them all Telemachus spoke out with royal authority. Well now, Zeus, son of Cronus, must have made me foolish, my dear mother, although quite sensible, says she'll be leaving with just another man, abandoning this home, and I just laugh. My witless heart finds that enjoyable. After he'd said this, Telemachus threw off the purple cloak covering his back, jumped up and removed the sharp sword from his shoulders. First he set up the axes. He dug a trench, one long ditch for all of them in a straight line. Then he stamped the earth down flat around them. Amazement gripped all those observing him to watch him organize those axes properly, although before that time he'd never seen them. Then Epeus' son addressed them. All you comrades, get up in order now from left to right, beginning from the place where the steward pours the wine. Atenus spoke, and what he'd just proposed they found agreeable. The first attendant was Laodice, son of Enops, their soothsayer. He always sat furthest away beside the lovely mixing bowl. That was the man who first picked up the bow and the swift arrow. After moving to the threshold and standing there, he tried the bow, but couldn't string it. His hands, which were delicate and weak, grew weary before he could succeed in stringing up the bow. He then spoke up among the suitors. My friends, I'm not the man to string this bow, so now let someone else take hold of it. This bill will take away from many excellent men their lives and spirits, since it's far better to die than live and fail in the attempt to have what we are gathered here to get, always waiting here in hope day after day. Then he sat again on the chair he'd just risen from. But Antinous took issue with what he'd just said, talking directly to him. Leotis, what wretched, sorry words. As I listened, it made me angry, as if this bow would, in fact, take away the lives and spirits of the very finest men, just because you couldn't string it. Your royal mother did not produce in you the sort of man who has sufficient strength to draw a bow and shoot an arrow, but some other man among these noble suitors will soon string it. This said, Antinous called out to Melanthius the goatherd. Come now, Melanthius, light a fire in the hall. Set beside it a large chair with a fleece across it, and bring a hefty piece of fat, if there's some inside the house, so the young men here will warm the bow and rub grease onto it, then test the bow and end this contest. When he said this, Melanthius quickly lit a tireless fire. Then he brought a large chair up, draped a fleece on it, and set it down beside the fire. And from inside the house fetched a large piece of fat. Then the young men warmed the bow and tested it, but they couldn't string it. Whatever strength they had was far too little. Antinous and godlike Eurymachus, the Suitors' leaders, still remained. The two of them, with their abilities, were the finest men by far. Now, the cattle herder and the keeper of the wine, belonging to the godlike Odysseus, had gone out, both together. So Lord Odysseus himself left the house to follow after them. And then, when they'd gone beyond the gates and courtyard, he spoke, addressing them with reassuring words. You there, cattlemen and swineherds, shall I tell you something and keep it to yourself? My spirit tells me I should speak to you. If Odysseus were to come back suddenly, brought from somewhere by a god, would you too be the sort of men who would defend him? Would you support the suitors or Odysseus? Then the cattle herder answered, O Father Zeus, would that you might fulfill this very wish. May that man come and led on by some god. Then you would know the kind of strength I have and how my hands can show my power. And then Eumaeus too made the same sort of prayer to all the gods that wise Odysseus would come back to his own home. Once Odysseus had clearly seen how firm their minds were, he spoke to them again, saying these words. Well, here I am in person after suffering much misfortune. I've come home, back in the 20th year to my own land. Of those who work for me, I recognize that you're the only two who want me back. Among the rest, I've heard no one praying that my return would bring me home again. I'll tell you both how this is going to end. And I'll speak the truth. If on my behalf some god will overcome those noble suitors, I'll bring you each a wife, and I'll provide possessions and a house built near my home. Then you'll be my companion and kinsman of Telemachus. Come, I'll show you something, a sure sign you will clearly know it's me and trust me in your hearts. Here's an old scar I got from a boar's white tusk, and then I got to Parnassus with Telemachus' sons. As he said this, Odysseus pulled aside his rags, exposing the great scar. Once those two had seen it, noted every detail, they threw their arms around the wise Odysseus, burst into tears, and welcomed him, kissing his head and shoulders. Odysseus did the same. He kissed their heads and hands. They would have kept on crying until sunset if Odysseus himself hadn't called a halt and said, Stop these laments. Let's have no more crying. Someone might come out of the hall, see us, and tell the people in the house. Let's go in. One by one, not all together. I'll go first. You come later. And let's make this our sign. All those other men, the noble suitors, will not allow the quiver and the bow to be given to me. But good Eumaeus, as you're carrying that bow through the house, put it in my hands and tell the women to lock their room. After he said this, Odysseus went to the stately home and sat down on the chair from which he had arisen. The two men, godlike Odysseus' servants, then went in as well. Eurymachus already had the bow in hand, warming it here and there in the firelight, but even doing that, he could not string it. Then his noble heart gave a mighty groan, and he spoke to them directly. He was angry. It's too bad. I'm frustrated for myself and for you all. I'm not that unhappy about the marriage, though I am upset. There are many more Achaean women, some here in secret Ithaca itself, others in different cities. But if we are so weak compared to godlike Odysseus that we can't string his bow, it's a disgrace which men will learn about in years to come. Antinous appeared to his son, then answered him, Eurymachus, that's not going to happen. You yourself know it. At this moment in the country there is a feast day sacred to the god. So who would bend the bow? No, set it to one side without saying anything. So, come let the steward begin to pour wine in the cups so we can make libations. Set the curved bow aside. In the morning we'll test the bow and end the contest. Antinous finished. When they finished libations and drank wine to their heart's content, Odysseus, a crafty man who had a trick in mind, spoke out, Suitors of the splendid queen, listen to me so you can say what the heart inside my chest is prompting me to say. It's a request, a plea, especially to Eurymachus and godlike Antinous, since what he said was most appropriate. That for the moment you should stop this business with the bow and turn the matter over to the gods. Give me the polished bow, so here among you can test my power in arms and see if I still have enough strength in my supple limbs the way I used to have, or if my travels and my lack of food have quite destroyed it. Odysseus finished. They were all extremely angry, afraid that he might string the polished bow. Then Antinous, speaking to him directly, took Odysseus to test. You wretched stranger, your mind lacks any sense. You've none at all. Aren't you content to share a feast with us, such illustrious men, without being disturbed or lacking any food, and then to hear what we say to one another as we speak? Wise Penelope then answered him and said, Antinous, it's neither good nor proper to deny guests of Telemachus a chance, no matter who it is comes to this house. And if, trusting in his strength and power, the stranger strings Odysseus' great bow, do you think he'll take me to his home and make me his wife? I'm sure he himself carries no such hope in that chest of his, so none of you should be at dinner here with sorrow in his heart because of him. That would be undignified. Shrewd Telemachus answered her and said, Among the Achaeans, no man has a right stronger in my own to give the bow to any one I wish or to withhold it. None of those who rule in rocky Ithaca or in the islands neighboring Elis, whose horses graze. Among these men, no one will deny my will by force if I wish to give the bow even to the stranger as an outright gift to take away with him. But you should keep up to your own chamber and keep busy with your proper work, your loom and spindle, and tell your women to go about their tasks. The bow will be a matter for the men, especially me, since the power in this house is mine. Penelope, astonished, went back to her rooms, taking to heart the prudent words her son had said. The worthy swineherd picked up the curving bow and was carrying it. He came to shrewd Odysseus and played it in his hands. Then he called the nurse Eurycleia and said to her, I see Eurycleia, Telemachus is telling you to lock up the closely fitted doorway to this hall. If anyone hears groans inside this room or any noise from men within these halls, she's not to run outside but stay where she is, carrying out her work in silence. After he said this, her words could find no wings, so she locked the doors of that well-furnished hall. And Melanthius, without a word, slipped outside and locked the courtyard gates, then went inside, sat down again on the seat where he got up, and observed Odysseus, who had already had the bow. He was turning it this way and that, testing it in different ways to see if, while its lord was gone, worms had nibbled on the horns. Shrewd Odysseus, once he's raised the bow and looked it over on all sides, then, just as someone really skilled at playing the lyre and singing has no trouble when he loops a string around a brand new peg, tying the twisted sheep's gut down at either end, that's how easily Odysseus strung that great bow. Holding it in his right hand, he tried the string. Then he picked up a swift arrow lying by itself on the table there beside him. He set it against the bow on the bridge, pulled the notched arrow and the bow string back, still sitting on the seat, and with a sure aim let the arrow fly. It did not miss, not even a single top in all the arrowheads. The arrow, weighted with bronze, went straight through and out the other end, and then Odysseus called out to Telemachus, Telemachus, the stranger sitting in your halls has not disgraced you. I did not miss my aim or work too long to string that bow. My strength is still intact in spite of all the suitors' scornful jibes. Now it's time to get a dinner ready for these Achaeans while there's still some light, then entertain ourselves in different ways with singing and the lyre. These are things which should accompany a banquet. As he spoke, he gave a signal with his eyebrows. Telemachus, godlike Odysseus' dear son, cinched up his sword, closed his fist around a spear, moved close beside his father, right by his seat, and stood there fully armed with glittering bronze. Book 22, The Killing of the Suitors. Then shrewd Odysseus stripped off his rags, grabbed up the bow and quiver full of arrows, and sprang over to the large doorway. He dumped swift arrows right there at his feet, and then addressed the suitors. This competition to decide the issue is now over, but there's another target, one no man has ever struck. I'll find out if I can hit it. May Apollo grant I get the glory. As Odysseus spoke, he aimed a bitter arrow straight at Antinous, who was just about to raise up to his lips a fine double-handled goblet he was holding in his hands so he can drink some wine. In his heart there was no thought of slaughter. Among those feasting, who would ever think in such a crowd of people, one man, even with such truly unstanding strength, would bring himself an evil death, his own black fate. Odysseus took aim and hit him with an arrow in the throat. Its point passed through his tender neck. He slumped into his side, and as he was hit, the cup fell from his hand. A thick spurt of human blood came flowing quickly from his nose. Then suddenly he pushed the table from him with his foot, spilling food onto the floor. The bread and roasted meat were ruined, and when the suitors saw Antinous fall, they raised an uproar. They began to shout, yelling words of anger at Odysseus. Stranger, we'll pay for shooting arrows at this man. It's certain he'll be killed at once and for all. You would kill the man, by far the finest youth in all of Ithaca, and now the vultures are going to eat you up right here. They did not think he'd killed the man on purpose. In their foolishness, they didn't realize they'd all become enmeshed in destruction's snare. Shrewd Odysseus scowled at them and gave his answer. You dogs, because you thought I'd not come back from Troy to my own home, you've been ravaging my house, raping women, and in your devious way wooing my wife while I was still alive, with no fear of the gods who hold wide heaven, or of any man who might take his revenge in days to come, and now a fatal net has caught you all. As Odysseus said these words, pale fear seized everyone. Each man looked around to see how he might flee, complete destruction. Only Eurymachus spoke. He answered him and said, if in fact it's true that you're Odysseus of Ithaca back home again, you're right in what you say about the actions of the Achaeans here, these frequent reckless conduct in your home. There are many foolish actions in the field, but the man responsible for all these things now lies dead. I mean, Antinous. Now he himself has died, as he deserved. At this point you should spare your people. Later on we'll collect throughout the land repayment for all you've had to eat and drink inside your halls, and every man will bring compensation on his own, in an amount worth 20 oxen, paying you back in gold and bronze until your heart is mollified. Shrewd Odysseus glared at him and then replied, Eurymachus, if you offered me all the goods you got from your own fathers, everything which you now own, and added other assets you could obtain elsewhere, not even then would I hold back my hands from slaughter, not until the suitors pay for all their arrogance. Now you've a choice, to fight here face to face, or if any man wishes to evade his death and lethal fate, to run away. But I don't think there's one who will escape complete destruction. Once Odysseus spoke, their knees and hearts went slack right where they stood. Then Eurymachus spoke once more, calling out to them, Friends, this man won't check those all-conquering hands of his. Instead, now he's got the polished bow and quiver from that smooth threshold he'd just shoot at us till he's killed us all. So let's think now about how we should fight. Pull out your swords and set tables to block those arrows. They bring on death so fast. And then let's charge, go at him together in a group. With these words, Eurymachus pulled out a sword, a sharp two-edged blade of bronze, and then charged out straight at Odysseus with a blood-curdling shout. As he did so, Lord Odysseus shot an arrow. It struck him in the chest beside the nipple and drove the swift shaft straight down into his liver. Eurymachus' sword fell from his hand onto the ground. He bent double and then fell, writhing on the table, knocking food and two-handled cups onto the floor. His forehead kept hammering the earth, his heart in agony as both his feet kicked at the chair and made it shake. A mist fell over both his eyes. Then Amphinomus went at glorious Odysseus, turning straight for him. He drew out a sharp sword to see if he could somehow yield the door to him, but Telemachus moved in too quickly for him. He threw a bronze-tipped spear and hit him from behind between the shoulders. He drove it through his chest. With a crash, Amphinomus fell, and his forehead struck hard against the ground. Telemachus jumped back, leaving his spear in Amphinomus, afraid that if he tried to pull out the long-shadowed spear, some Achaean might attack and stab him with the sword or strike him while he was stooping down. And so he quickly ran away and then moved across to his dear father. Standing close to him, he spoke. His words had wings. Father, now I'll bring you a shield, 2 spears, and a bronze helmet, one that fits your temples. When I get back, I'll arm myself and hand out other armor to the swineherd and the keeper of the goats. It's better if we fully arm ourselves. Quick-witted Odysseus answered him and said, Get them here fast while I still have arrows to protect myself, in case they push me from the door, since I'm here by myself. Odysseus spoke, and Telemachus obeyed his dear father. He went off to the storeroom where their splendid weapons lay. From the place he took 4 shields, 8 spears, and 4 bronze helmets with thick horsehair plumes. He went out carrying these and came back to his dear father very quickly. First he armed himself with bronze around the body, and the 2 servants did the same, putting on the lovely armor. Then they took their places on either side of skilled and sly Odysseus, who, as long as they had arrows to protect him, kept on aiming at the suitors in his house, shooting at them one by one. As they hit them, they fell down in heaps. But once he'd used his arrows, the king could shoot no more. So he leaned the bow against the doorpost of the well-constructed wall and let it stand beside the shining entranceway. Then he grabbed 2 heavy bronze-tipped spears. In that well-constructed wall there was a passage, shut off with close-fitting doors. So Odysseus told the worthy swineherd to stand beside this door and watch, for there was just one way of reaching it. Then Agilus spoke, calling all the suitors, Friends, can someone climb up to that side door and tell the men to raise a quick alarm? Then this man won't be shooting anymore. But Melanthius, the goatherd, answered him and said, It can't be done, divinely raised Agilus. The fine gate to the yard is awfully near, and the passage entrance hard to get through. One man could block the way for everyone if he were brave. But come, let me bring you armor from the storeroom. You can put it on. It's in the house, I think. There's nowhere else Odysseus and his noble son could store their weapons. Once goatherd Melanthius said this, he climbed a flight of stairs inside the palace, up to Odysseus' storerooms. There he took 12 shields, as many spears, many helmets made of bronze, with bushy horsehair plumes. Once he'd made it back, carrying the weapons as quickly as he could, he gave them to the suitors. When Odysseus saw them putting armor on and their hands brandishing long spears, his knees and fond heart went slack. His task appeared enormous. He called out quickly to Telemachus. His words had wings. Telemachus, it seems one of the women in the house is stirring up nasty fight against us, or perhaps Melanthius might be the one. Shrewd Telemachus then said in reply, Father, I bear the blame for this myself. It's no one else's fault. I left it open, the close-fitting door of that storage room. One of them has keener eyes than I do. Come, good Eumaeus, shut the storeroom door, and try to learn if one of the women has done it, or if it's Melanthius and Odysseus. I suspect it's him. While they were saying these things to one another, Melanthius the goatherd went back once more to carry more fine armor from the storeroom. But the loyal swineherd saw him and spoke out, saying a quick word to Odysseus, who was close by. Resourceful Odysseus, there's his son, raised from Zeus. There's that man again, the wretch we think is visiting the storeroom. Give me clear instructions. Should I kill him if I prove the stronger man, or should I bring him to you here? He can pay you back for the many insolent acts he's done, all those schemes he's thought up in your home. Resourceful Odysseus answered him and said, Those proud suitors Telemachus and I will keep penned up here inside the hall, no matter how ferociously they fight. You two twist Melanthius' feet and arms behind him, throw him in the storeroom, then lash boards against his back. As Odysseus said this, they listened eagerly and then obeyed his words. They moved off to the storeroom without being seen by the man inside. He was, as it turned out, searching for weapons in a corner of the room. So then when Melanthius, the goatherd, was coming out across the threshold, the two men jumped out and grabbed him. They dragged him inside by the hair, threw him on the ground. The man was terrified, and tied his feet and hands with heart-wrenching bonds. They lashed him tight behind his back, as Odysseus, Laertes' royal son, had endured so much, had told them. They fixed a twisted rope to him, yanked him off the lofty pillar, and raised him near the roof beams. They left Melanthius there, tied up, hanging in bonds, which would destroy him. The two put on their armor, closed the shining door, and made their way to wise and crafty Odysseus. Filled with fighting spirit, they stood there, 4 of them, on the threshold, with many brave men in the hall. The suitors were being urged on by Agelaus, Damastor's son, by Eurynomus, Amphimenid, Demoptimus, Pacinder, Polypus' son, and clever Polybus. Among the suitors still alive, these were the finest men by far. Odysseus' bow and his swift arrows had destroyed the others. Agelaus spoke to them, addressing everyone. Friends, this man's hands have been invincible, but now they'll stop. Don't throw those spears at them, not all at once. Come, you 6 men, throw first, to see if Zeus will let us strike Odysseus and win the glory. Those others over there will be no trouble after he's collapsed. The suitors kept throwing spears with frantic haste, but though there were many, Athena made them miss. One man struck the doorpost of the well-built hall. Another hit the closely fitted door. One ash spear, weighted down with bronze, fell against the wall. But Amphimenid did hit Telemachus' hand, a glancing blow across the wrist. The bronze point cut the surface of the skin, and with his long spear, Ctesippus grazed Screamonius' shoulder above the shield. But the spear veered off and fell down on the ground. At close range, Odysseus wounded Damastor's son with his long spear, and Telemachus injured Leocritus, son of Evenor. He struck him with the spear right in the groin and drove the bronze straight through, so Leocritus fell on his face, his whole forehead smashing down on the ground. Just as falcons with hooked talons and curved beaks fly down from the mountains, chasing birds and driving them well below the clouds, that they sweep along the plain and then pounce and kill them, for there's no defense, no flying away while men get pleasure from the chase. That's how Odysseus and his men pursued the suitors and struck them down one by one throughout the hall. As they smashed their heads in, dreadful groans arose, and the whole floor was awash in blood. And then the minstrel Phemius, son of Terpes, who had been compelled to sing before the suitors, kept trying to get away from his own murky fate. So he set the hollow lyre down on the ground, and between the mixing bowl and the silver-studded chair, rushed out in person to clasp Odysseus' wings, and pleaded with him. His words had wings. I implore you, Odysseus, show me respect and pity. There'll be sorrow for you later if you kill me, a minstrel, for I sing to gods and men. I am self-taught. The God has planted in my heart all kinds of songs, and I'm good enough to sing before you, as to a god. Don't be too eager then to cut my throat. Your dear son Telemachus could tell you that it wasn't my desire that I need to spend time at your house, singing for the suitors at their banquets, but their greater power and numbers brought me here by force. As Phemius said this, royal Telemachus heard him and spoke up, calling to his father, who was close by. Hold on! Don't let your sword injure this man. He's innocent. We should save Medon too, the herald, who always looked out for me inside the house when I was still a child. Unless Philodius killed him, or the swineherd, or he ran into you as you were on the rampage in the hall. Telemachus spoke. Medon, whose mind was clever, heard him, for he was cowering underneath a chair, his skin covered by a new flayed oxhide, trying to escape his own black fate. He quickly jumped out from beneath the chair, threw out the oxhide, rushed up to clasp Telemachus' knees, and begged. His words had wings. Here I am, my friend, stop, and tell your father to restrain himself, in case, as he exalts his great power, he slaughters me with that sharp bronze of his, in his fury with the suitors, those men who consumed his goods here in his own hall, those fools who did not honor you at all. Resourceful Odysseus smiled at him and said, Cheer up. This man here has saved your life. He's rescued you, so you know in your heart and can tell someone else how doing good is preferable by far to acting badly. As Odysseus spoke, the 2 men went away inside the hall and sat down there by the altar of great Zeus, peering around in all directions, always thinking they'd be killed. Odysseus, too, looked round the house to check if anyone was hiding there, still alive, trying to escape his own dark fate. But every man he looked at, and there were plenty, had fallen in blood and dust, like fish, which, in the meshes of a net, fishermen have pulled from the gray sea up on the curving beach, lying piled up on the sand, longing for sea waves, while the bright sun takes away their life. That's how the suitors then were lying in heaps on one another. Resourceful Odysseus then said to Telemachus, Telemachus, go and call the nurse in here, Eurycleia, so I can speak to her. Something's on my mind. I want to tell her. Once Odysseus spoke, Telemachus obeyed what his dear father said. He shook the door and called to Eurycleia, saying, Get up, old woman, born so long ago, the one in charge of female servants in the palace. Come out, my father's calling for you. He's got something he wants to say. He spoke, but Euryclea's words could find no wings. She opened up the door of the well-furnished hall and came out. Telemachus went first and led the way. There she found Odysseus with the bodies of the dead, spattered with blood and gore, like a lion moving off from feeding on a farmyard ox, his whole chest and both sides of his muzzle caked with blood, a terrifying sight. That's how Odysseus looked, with blood-stained feet and upper arms. Euryclea, once she saw the bodies and huge amounts of blood, was ready to cry out for joy now that she'd seen such a mighty act. But Odysseus held her back and checked her eagerness. He spoke to her. His words had wings. "O woman, you can rejoice in your heart, in your own heart, but don't cry out loud. Restrain yourself, for it's a sacrilege to boast above the bodies of the slain. Divine fate in their own reckless acts has killed these men, who failed to honor any man on earth who came among them, good, bad, or good, and so through their depravity they met an evil fate. But come now, tell me about the women in these halls, the ones who disrespect me, and the ones who bear no blame." His dear nurse Euryclea then answered him and said, "All right, my child, I'll tell you the truth. In these halls of yours there are 50 female servants, women we have taught to carry out their work, to comb out wool and bear their slavery. Of these, 12 in all have gone along without a sense of shame, and no respect for me or even for Penelope." Resourceful Odysseus then answered her, "Those women who before all this behaved so badly, tell them to come here." Odysseus then called Telemachus to him, together with Eumaeus and Melanthius. He spoke to them. His words had wings. "Start carrying those corpses outside now, and then take charge of the servant women. Have these splendid chairs and tables cleaned, wiped with porous sponges soaked in water. Once you put the entire house in order, then take these servants from the well-built hall to a spot outside between the round house and the sturdy courtyard wall, and kill them. Slash them with long swords until the life is gone from all of them, and they've forgotten Aphrodite and how they loved the suitors when they had sex with them in secret." Odysseus spoke. Then the crowd of women came, wailing plaintively and shedding many tears. First they gathered the corpses of the dead and laid them out underneath the portico, leaning them against each other in the well-fenced yard. Odysseus himself gave them their instructions and hurried on their work. The women were compelled to carry out the dead. After that they cleaned the splendid chairs and tables, wiping them down with water and porous sponges. Telemachus, along with Melanthius and Eumaeus, with shovels scraped the floor inside the well-built hall, and the women took the dirt and threw it in the yard. When they put the entire hall in order, they led the women out of the sturdy house to place between the round house and fine wall around the courtyard, herding them into a narrow space where there was no escape. Shrewd Telemachus began by speaking to the other two. "I don't want to take these women's lives with a clean death. They poured insults on my head, on my mother, and were always sleeping with the suitors." He spoke, then tied the cable of a dark prowed ship to a large pillar, threw one end above the round house, then pulled it taut and high so no woman's foot could reach the ground. Just as doves and long-winged thrushes charge into a snare set in the thicket as they seek out their roosting place and find out they've been welcomed by a dreadful bed, that's how those women held their heads, all in a row, with nooses fixed around their necks, so they'd have a pitiful death. For a little while they twitched their feet, but that did not last long. Then they brought Melanthius out to the doorway to the yard. With pitiless bronze, they sliced away his nose and ears and ripped off his cock and balls as raw meat for dogs to eat, and in their rage hacked off his hands and feet. After they'd done that, they washed their hands and feet and went inside the house, back to Odysseus. Their work was done, but he called to Euryclea, his dear nurse. "Oh, woman, bring sulfur here to purify the hall, and bring me fire so I can purge the hall. Ask Penelope to come here with her slaves, and get all the women in the house to come." Dear nurse Euryclea then followed what she said. She brought fire and sulfur, so Odysseus purged the house and the yard completely. Euryclea went back through Odysseus' splendid home to tell the women what had happened and to order them to reappear. They came out holding torches, then gathered round Odysseus, embracing him. They clasped and kissed his head, his hands and shoulders in loving welcome. A sweet longing seized him to sigh and weep, for in his heart he knew them all.